History isn't written in dusty books here. It's etched into the rock itself. Petra rises in our imagination like a mirage, a gleaming city of red stone that once defied the desert, only to vanish into sand. What happened to this brilliant civilization that thrived where no empire dared to dwell? Our treasure hunt begins with a single question. How did Petra, this impossible rock-cut metropolis, rise in the desert and then disappear almost without a trace? Imagine a place so remote that great kings ignored it. For centuries, the silence of the Arabian desert reigned here. Then, in the 4th century BCE, a hardy band of wanderers turned up. They were the Nabataeans, nomadic traders who saw not an empty canyon, but a hidden home. By that time, Petra was already a secret oasis. The Nabataeans chose this narrow valley as their capital and slowly transformed it. They dug the first cisterns and leveled stone courtyards. When the mighty Seleucid armies marched in 312 BCE, they found Petra a fortress the likes of which Alexander had never envisioned. These desert dwellers were born engineers. Living at the crossroads of trade, they understood rain and stone as few others did. By carving channels and dams into the sandstone, they harvested every drop of water. Underground cisterns the size of temples held the winter floods. Water didn't just pass through Petra. It bubbled up under the ground, fed by springs and the rains collected by roofs and courtyards. In this way, gardens appeared where none should grow. Olive trees and grapevines bloomed along sloping terraces. Fruit trees shaded narrow alleys. Petra bloomed green against the red rock, its life sustained by sheer engineering brilliance. Greek and Roman observers marveled that these desert nomads were skilled in agriculture, stone carving, and rainwater harvesting. Unheard of success in such an unforgiving land. This was a city born from daring. By the 2nd century BCE, Petra had become the center of a rising kingdom. The Nabataean kings, modestly recorded in history, built temples and tombs that spoke of ambition. Under King Aretas III and later Aretas IV, Petra's population swelled, likely reaching around 20,000 people at its peak. We see traces of their prosperity everywhere. Monumental facades like the Treasury, Al-Khazna, and the sumptuous crypts were sculpted directly from the cliff faces. Imagine craftsmen at work, chiseling columns, Corinthian capitals, and intricate friezes out of living stone, a city emerging bit by bit from the rocks themselves. By then, Petra was rich and bustling. Daily life in Petra was extraordinary. Archaeology finds ovens, pottery kilns, and dyed cloth showing that comfort and culture thrived. Fossilized fish bones and grains suggest Nabataeans ate well. Goats and camels penned under rock overhangs. Even children played with miniature clay wagons like the real camel caravans far below. Pottery stamped with royal seals means that even daily goods declared Nabataean identity. In the forum, an open square ringed by carved columns. Women in tunics and traders from distant lands might gather in the sun. Musicians playing flutes could walk from one market stall to the next. The people of Petra grew up hearing tales of treasure-filled caravans, and they believed them, so much that children's gravestones were inscribed with names and wishes for the afterlife, carved just like on palaces. Petra was a melting pot of faiths. The Nabataeans worshipped their own gods like Dushra, a mountain god, and Al-Uzza, a goddess of power, but they borrowed freely from the wider world. Inscriptions and ruins show temples rededicated to Zeus or Aphrodite. On coins and altars we find winged sun discs and Greek letters side by side, with Nabataean Aramaic script. One altar in Petra's main temple was inscribed to Zeus Hypsistos, even though it sat under Petra's native sky. Cleopatra's influence reached as far as here. Egyptian motifs appear on Corinthian capitals in Petra. Festivals blended traditions. One feast might honor a Nabataean ancestral king. The next day honor the Egyptian goddess Isis. Their city felt like home to everyone. Greek inscriptions, Palmyrene lettering, Babylonian seal impressions, all had a place in Petra's mosaic. On the world stage, the Nabataeans parleyed cleverly. By 106 CE, the Romans annexed the Nabataean kingdom, making Petra the capital of a new Roman province. Arabia Petra. Even this didn't fully break Petra's spirit. Roman emperors granted local autonomy. One wonders how Nabataean senators sat in rock halls debating taxes, or if Roman soldiers marveled at Nabataean engineering. Indeed, coins minted in Petra under Roman rule still bear Nabataean motifs. Under their own king's names or a Caesar's effigy, those coins financed trade along the silk and spice routes. In this way, every ambassador who walked Petra's courtyards left evidence of the city's reach. In sum, the Nabataeans took the barren canyon and, stone by stone, made it into a living city. The desert did not swallow them. Instead, they turned it against itself, luring water from each flash flood. In the height of their civilization, Petra was not just a tourist curiosity. It was a world capital of commerce and culture, proving that a city of stone could have a beating heart of enterprise. Under the golden sky, Petra became more than a city. It was a breathing organism. Its arteries were the water channels leading to cisterns beneath every courtyard. Its marketplaces pulsed with life. Entire amphorae of spices arrived from India and Arabia, and leather-bound ledgers recorded every transaction. By the 1st century CE, Petra's trade empire was unrivaled. Caravans funneled frankincense, myrrh, and Egyptian linen through the Sikh, practically linking Arabia to the ancient world. Toll stations carved from stone collected wealth from every caravan, making Petra queen of the trade routes. This golden age was visible in architecture. The colonnaded street, only foundations remain now, would have stretched as grandly as any Roman road. Inscriptions on those columns survive, dedications in Aramaic and Greek showing citizens funding temples or honoring emperors. One discovery revealed a semicircular Senate house carved into bedrock, with stone benches as if for tribal councils or royal audiences. Imagine Petra's city council meeting there, decreeing tax laws or hosting foreign dignitaries under a rock ceiling. This shows the Nabataeans created a civic life, not just a royal palace. No corner of Petra was mundane. Even the hillside amphitheater on the city's edge boasts rows of stone seats, now empty, but once echoing with music and rhetoric. Perhaps religious dramas or political speeches took place there. On a summer night, the theater's natural acoustics would carry the sound of water, lamplight flickering on all-seeing stone sculptures. It was theater in the rock, not built in wood or brick, but hewn from the living mountain. Petra's artistry extended to color. Archaeologists have found traces of vivid paint on even the treasury's facade. A 14th-century Arab historian reported seeing deep red paint on those columns. Imagine the scene centuries ago, not pale stone, but a glowing facade of ochre and gold under bright sun. Intricate mosaics decorated floors inside some halls, blending Greek geometric patterns with local floral designs. The greatest temple in the Forum once had a colonnade painted in reds and blues. Even in simple homes, earthenware jars with colorful glaze were common. All this tells us Petra was at least as vibrant and refined as Rome or Antioch, just literally in a canyon instead of on a hill. Yet every miracle has its price. Petra's brilliance rested on exacting work and delicate balances. Every rooftop and road was engineered to channel rain. The people guarded those systems jealously. One damaged dam or a forgotten cistern could spell disaster downstream. In fact, modern surveys show that even slight changes in season could overflow channels. The Nabataeans, experts as they were, always lived on a knife's edge. Years of drought meant no grain, and floods meant danger. But Petra did thrive. Palatial tombs, some holding kings, lined the outer hills. The monastery, the royal tombs, the urn-topped Khazar al-Bint. Each one proclaimed wealth. Each one was shared by a people who had mastered the desert's challenges. And so, for a shining moment, Petra was a golden empire carved in stone. Its culture was a tributary connecting east and west. In Petra, gilded ceilings mingled with Bedouin tents, and Greek togas shared space with Nabataean robes. We see this in the grave goods, Mesopotamian cylinder seals, Indian gemstones, Egyptian faience. In Petra's tables, An Athenian wine cup might set beside an Arabian spice box. Everyone, from a Persian envoy to a Yemeni trader, recognized this city's power. But an empire built on such delicate systems carried a hidden fragility. Consider, Petra had no hinterland of its own. Its survival was tied to trade currents and desert rain. In late antiquity, new powers began to reroute those currents. The Romans built ports and roads elsewhere. The Persian Sassanids opened Gulf passages. Each diverted caravan was a wound. By the mid-3rd century AD, Petra's deputies in Antioch or Alexandria had less cargo to declare. The fewer caravans meant less tithe, less food, and fewer travelers to pump life into Petra's markets. Meanwhile, political winds shifted. When Rome set Herod as king of Judea and absorbed the Nabataean kingdom in 106 AD, Petra technically gained Roman protection. But this also meant Petra lost its diplomatic independence. Now its fortunes were tied to imperial edicts, and when Rome's focus moved to cooler climates, Petra cooled too. The Pax Romana allowed peace, but also made our canyon out of fashion. Who needed a detour through the mountains when you could sail by sea or take imperial highways? Nature itself delivered the final blows. In 363 AD, a massive earthquake shattered much of Petra. Seismic records from distant Antioch tell us it was one of antiquity's worst quakes. It collapsed arches and filled water channels with rubble. The Nabataeans patched what they could, but trust was broken. If the very ground gave way, could Petra endure? Scholars believe a second quake in 551 AD left more scars. Without modern building codes, each tremor sucked strength out of the city. Farmers lost spring outlets, walls lost mortar. In years after, Petra whispered in the world's ear, "We are weary." Beyond one tremor, there was a multitude of smaller cuts. Imagine every year's tiny shifts in rock-cracking tombs or leaking cisterns. We still find collared fragments of pottery where ancient floods deposited them far from the city. Every fragment reminds us that Petra's foundations were slowly leaching away. By 700 AD, Petra was like an exhausted flame. The people, or those who had survived, had quietly drifted off the map. There was no grand sacking. It was a gentle sadness of attrition. In the centuries that followed, Petra faded into legendary whispers. The great caravans ceased, and fields lay fallow. Travelers on the way to Mecca might pass through the sick and only see goats grazing in the colonnades. Local Bedouin tribes, who knew every rock and crevice, called Petra al-Butra, the Green City, but treated it as a familiarly haunted ruin. They led camels through the canyon and avoided disturbing the monuments. One Bedouin guide, decades later, would describe entering the treasury with reluctance, as if it were a sacred tomb of genies. Legends sprouted from the abandonment. Arabs spoke of jinn guarding hidden treasure there. Some whispered that Solomon himself had been the architect of Petra's might, a myth that still occasionally appears in folklore. In maps and texts of the early medieval period, Petra is confused with Sodom or Solomon's Ophir. Perhaps that confusion saved it. None of the great conquerors, Crusaders, Mongols, Ottomans, prioritized a cursed city stuck in the hills. Left alone, Petra's roof caves became goat pens, and courtyards became graveyards for forgotten kings. So for about a millennium, Petra waited in silence. Not completely invisible. Islamic geographers mentioned a mountain with ruined walls, but mostly missing from history books. The outside world was busy forging new empires, unaware that a milestone lay buried in red dust, waiting to be noticed again. The silence ended in 1812. A Swiss explorer, Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, was the first Westerner to deliberately find Petra, though he had to pretend it was just a rumor before he dared ask locals about it. Imagine the shock as the treasury's rock face emerged before him, a rose-red palace in the hills, unmatched in grandeur. The word "lost city" suddenly applied to Petra, even though it had never fully disappeared to Arab neighbors. Word spread through the West like wildfire. Within years, European artists and scholars began arriving. David Roberts painted the treasury at dawn, making it the stuff of romantic legend. Michael S. Welland later noted how Roberts's images cast Petra's facades into Gothic fantasy. Victorian adventurers wrote travelogues full of awe and myth. One prominent publication called Petra the rose-red city half as old as time, and indeed it became a Victorian craze. Pet names like the Arabian Pompeii and the Cleopatra of Rock did the rounds, blending fact and fantasy. Through it all, misinterpretations flourished. Western visitors often mistook tombs for temples and vice versa. They thought Cleopatra's palace was literally Cleopatra's. It wasn't. They puzzled over Greek inscriptions used for local Nabataean kings. But every page of the story only added to Petra's mystique. As time went on, archaeology became more systematic. German and British teams mapped every ruin. Johns Hopkins University archaeologists unearthed a Nabataean crypt. American missions uncovered sacrificial altars. Modern tools confirmed tales. Carbon dating pegged a nomadic origin long before written records. In 2005, researchers even found fragments of the oldest known Arabic papyri in Petra's caves, evidence that history's final scribes passed through. Today, Petra is no longer a hidden wonder. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site dubbed one of the most precious cultural properties of man's heritage. Tens of thousands of visitors walk the Sikh each year, their cameras clicking as if to fill the silence with memory. Yet Petra remains mysterious. Its tunnels of knowledge still have locked doors. Earth scientists keep monitoring each tiny rockfall. Conservationists discuss climate change impact. Even in ruin, Petra is a living lesson. And now, after centuries of searching and stories, we arrive at our final revelation. The treasure was never gold or scrolls, it was understanding. Petra's rise and fall tells a timeless tale. Ambition builds wonders, but time brings humility. The city in the rock shows us that the greatest human achievements must dance with the forces of nature. The Nabataeans fought monsters, famine, invasion, drought, and nearly triumphed, carving their legacy in stone. But in the end, they became part of the landscape themselves, destined to vanish and reappear only in our dreams. Petra's greatest secret is that it survived precisely because it was forgotten. As historian Scott C. Levi noted, Petra was unwittingly preserved by neglect. While its stone walls stood silent, the rest of the world shaped itself around new centers. Those who do remember Petra today have learned from its empty tranquility that control is an illusion. No power is absolute, no empire eternal. We stand at the end of our journey back in the desert twilight. The treasury's facade glows like embers. It will eventually crumble to sand too. Its final lesson is humility. All legacies must answer to time. The name of Petra means rock, but its story reminds us that even rock bends to history. Thank you for joining us on this grand treasure hunt. Keep questioning, keep seeking, for every ancient canyon has echoes if we listen. Now, as we leave Petra's silence behind, remember, the quiet lessons of this lost city will continue to speak, in stone and story, as long as someone asks how the mighty fall. Farewell, traveler, and may the whispers of Petra guide your own journey forward.